I'm joined now by Avery Friedman, a civil rights attorney and law professor, and Richard Herman, a criminal defense attorney and law professor. Good to see you both.
Good to see you, Frederica.
All right, so Richard, you first. 3 parents agreed to change their pleas this week to guilty. Why now? And why did they find that that is the more favorable route to take?
Fred, these are federal prosecutions against these people. And the sentencing on federal prosecutions is governed by the federal sentencing guidelines, which are insane. They're insane, Fred. I mean, look at what happened. Amber Geiger broke into a guy's apartment, shot him, blew his head off, 2 shots, killed him. She got 10 years in prison, and she's ready for parole in 5 years. And these cases, these college scam cases, Fred, when you're looking at money, wire fraud and mail fraud and money laundering, you could be looking at 40 years in prison. And the judge in Boston made a statement. He said, listen, the range from now, so far for the 10 that have been sentenced has been probation to 5 months. But the judge made a statement, if you get convicted on cheating for test scores and utilizing the sports departments in these universities, you're going to be looking at substantial time. That's years.
Well,
these people have no choice.
Versus if you go ahead and plead guilty, you're likely to get a more lenient sentence of, say, Felicity Huffman, 14, roughly 14 days, 2 weeks.
14 days, right.
Gentleman, a dad yesterday, 1 month. I mean, that, beats, I guess, 40 years, as you put it, Richard. So, but then Avery, Robert Flaxman becoming that 10th parent to be sentenced, looking at, a month in jail. I mean, what is the message that is being sent ultimately, not just by the plea, a guilty plea, but then the types of sentencing that these parents are getting?
Well, it shows the federal guidelines are not insane. It talks about 0 to 6 months,
they are completely
which is actually appropriate in a case like this. If you find yourself in the country club of privilege, which all these people are in, the last thing you want to do is gloat about cheating and getting your kid into school. And at 2 p.m. East Coast time in a federal courtroom on Monday, one of the defendants, mom and dad, will be having to deal with that issue. Now, they deny that they gloated about it, but when you're dealing with money laundering and conspiracy to commit fraud, that's where the serious issues are. There has been a superseding indictment in some of these cases. So the easier cases, you had mentioned Felicity Huffman, that's 14 days. She started her term this week, and she'll be out in 14 days. But the serious ones are now coming up. And to answer your question, we're going to see what the federal court does this week to give us a pretty good idea of what's coming up. Total number of people, 52, 35 are parents. So this will tell you, give you a pretty good idea of what's coming up and what we're going to see.
So Richard, if you're, one of those, 50 parents, what do you need to be, how are you taking your cue from what potentially happens this week?
Good. You're running to your lawyer and you're saying, cut me the best deal you can. I can't win this case. And even when you cut the deal, Fred, next week they're only going to enter pleas. They're not going to be sentenced next week. It's a plea arrangement. They're going to enter into that, and then they'll be sentenced down the road a little bit. But here's the way to stop this, Fred. You have to make a deal here. There's no defense. There's no sympathy. Even when you make a deal and you go before the judge, there's no sympathy because of all the kids that worked so hard and took those SAT tests and prepared and missed out on playtime and everything else. They get rejected on these schools, and these spoiled brats get in because the parents pay a tennis coach $1 million to put the kid into some sort of athletic scholarship. But the feds are saying most time the kids didn't know, and I'm going to call BS on that. The kids know what their parents are doing. The kids have to suffer for this too. Some sort of deferred prosecution, some sort of deal, so the parents know if they do this, not only they are putting themselves at risk, but they're putting their child at risk because these kids. These two at Georgetown.
That's correct.
The one got expelled from Georgetown, Fred. It's an epidemic right now in this country. It's not fair, and there's no sympathy by these sentencing judges. None.
Avery.
And shouldn't be.
I mean, you think the penalty should be broader, not just the parents?
I think the children should be responsible. Again, we've had an expulsion of one, but the question is, what do the children, what do these students know? Most of the action is by, frankly, arrogant parents who think they can get away with it. That chapter in American college admissions is about to end because checks and balances are being put in to major schools like Stanford, Georgetown, Yale, and others. So these things are minimized. So this represents the end of an era. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and not to single out, the other name who is well known, the Lori Loughlin, case where apparently she, and her husband have said not guilty, and then watching others plead. Do you believe it is too late, perhaps, because of their demeanor, to even reconsider or think about a guilty plea? Because, there were doctored photographs in addition to big money involved in the application of at least one of their kids, Richard.
In these federal cases, Fred, the earlier you go in, the better deal you get. The longer you wait, the more you make the prosecution work. You don't get the same deal. So is it too late? It's too late to get that initial deal she could have gotten, Lori Loughlin. But right now, she's insane. So she's going to get sentenced to probably a year plus. And don't say those kids didn't know. Those kids in Lori Laughlin's case were taking pictures with the crew team.
You don't know every family.
They've never been in a boat in their life. They knew they were going to get a scholarship through the crew, and tennis players
and one
that
would
never
believe
played
that a
tabletop,
kid who
never
is
played ping pong or getting tennis
for
scholarships.
A school,
Come on,
even if
it's
their parents
ridiculous.
are really
they
involved,
know.
they kind of know about the application process. It is their name, their identity, their everything about whether to be involved. All right, Avery Freeman, Richard Herman.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and then there's that too. Okay.
Take care.
All right. Good to see you guys.
Go Yankees.
Take care.
Yankees, Fred. Come on.
Okay. Good to see you guys.